ओम पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. So once again, welcome to our regular session on Saturday morning. First of all, I am sorry for some gaps during the last 2 months because of the travel schedule. But I am happy that we are back on track and now we'll continue on our journey together. So we were discussing the topic in Bhagavad Gita in chapter 6. If just to recall a little bit, Arjun asked a question to Lord Krishna कि आप कभी तो संन्यास की बात करते हैं, कभी कर्म योग की बात करते हैं, तो इन दोनों में जो ज्यादा उपयुक्त है वो मेरे को बताइए. This is the question which was raised by Arjun, that which is better, the renunciation and going to sannyas, or the karma yoga, staying in the world and then performing your duties. So which is better? Because you are telling me that this is better or that is better, I'm a little bit confused. Though Lord Krishna was very clear in his message, but still Arjuna asked this question because he was not very clear. So the discussion is continuing on that particular question. And in the beginning of chapter 6, Lord Krishna propounded a very revolutionary idea that, in fact, the very first verse tells like this, that anasrita karm phalam karyam karm karoti hai, कि आप कर्म फल से अनाश्रित होके जो करने योग्य कर्म अगर आप करते हैं तो आप सन्यासी हैं और आप योगी हैं. So he is telling very clearly that you don't have to renounce the world and go to an ashram or move to a jungle or move to Himalayas. But if you can be completely detached from the outcome of your action and continue to do your duty with all devotion, then you are fully dedicated and you are fully in yoga. This is what he says. So he has, in this particular chapter, in the very beginning, he gave a very clear instruction that you don't have to renounce the world. If you renounce, that's up to you. You can do that also. But you don't have to renounce the world. You just have to renounce the outcome of your actions. You don't have to remain attached to that outcome. So this is one of the first lessons which he gave and made it very clear in the first 9 verses. Then verse number 10 onwards, he is actually telling us, or Arjuna, that how to do meditation. In these verses from verse number 10 to, I would say, 19 we will cover today. In these verses, he has covered what sage Patanjali covered in his what we call Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Patanjali Yoga Sutra has 196 Sanskrit verses, and it talks about what we call Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam, Pratyahar, Dharana, Dhyan, or Samadhi, and Samadhi. These 8 steps he talks about. It starts from Yam, Niyam, and then moves forward one after another, reaching to Dhyan and Samadhi at the end. It is not precisely in that order, but more or less the same contents have been covered from verse number 9 till verse number 18 of this chapter, where he has said how you sit down, how you prepare yourself for meditation, what kind of inner control you have to exercise, that you have to keep control of your senses and your mind, and how you have to be moderate in everything. That is, he has said in one point that यह योग न अधिक खाने वालों का न खाने वालों का न अधिक सहन करने वालों का न सहन करने वालों का है और न बहुत जागने वालों का और न जागने वालों का सिद्ध होता है मीन्स ही इज सेइंग दैट यू शुड अवॉइड the life of extremes. You should have a life of moderation. That is also part of the yoga. So he has gone into very precise details into this chapter, which are more or less replicated by Sage Patanjali years later in his what we call Patanjali Yoga Sutra. And the verse number 18, which we covered last time, finally he says that if we are spraha, the word which has been used is nispraha. Agar aap nispraha, we have discussed this word earlier. Nispraha means that a touch of the outside objects to your senses. That is, we call it also matra spars. The word is more or less similar. Nispraha means to avoid matra spars. That the outside objects of the world, when they come into contact with your sense organs, then they give you certain sensation. That sensation could be pleasant, it could be unpleasant. If we can be completely neutral to that sensation, nispray means that we are not impacted by that sensation, then we are established in yoga. So our sense organs are not impacted by the action which happens due to contact of the outside world with our sense organs. If we realize everything which we feel in this world is because of the contact of our sense organs with the outside world. For example, we eat food. The taste of the food, whether it is tasty or not tasty, it is because of the contact between food and our sense organ, that is the tongue and mouth. Now, tongue and mouth, when they come into contact with the food, you feel that sensation. Similarly, when your ear comes in contact with the sound outside, somebody is praising you, or somebody is abusing you, or somebody is criticizing you. Now that criticism or praise or uh, whatever abusing, that when it comes into contact with your sense organ, that is ear, then that sensation is created inside you. If somebody abuses you, you become angry. Somebody is praising you, you become happy. So that sensation happens. Similarly, when we see certain things, we see, say, beautiful mountains, we feel happy. When we see very dirty places, we feel unhappy. When we see a person who is beautiful, you feel happy. When you see a person who is ugly, you feel unhappy. That sensation happens because of the contact from the outside person or the object with your senses. So everything that happens in that way, which gives you certain sensations, whether they are pleasant or unpleasant. So Lord Krishna in the verse number 18 said that if we can be neutral to that, nisprah, the word which has been used is nisprah, when we are not impacted by those outside objects, then we are established in yoga. Now we will move to verse number 19, where we start today. Now, this is a very profound verse once again. Of course, each verse in Bhagavad Gita is profound, but certain verses have very special meaning. Now, this verse reads like this: जिस प्रकार वायु रहित स्थान में स्थित दीपक चलायमान नहीं होता, वैसी ही उपमा परमात्मा के ध्यान में लगे हुए योगी के चित्त की कही गई है. Now, when you have a deepak, I'm not talking about lamp because lamp could mean anything in English. Uh, Deepak is the one which has bati and which has oil or ghee, and then it is flickering. Quite often, when you leave the deepak anywhere, you light it, it keeps flickering. The flickering is the nature of that because of the wind which is blowing. It may be strong, it may be, if the wind is strong, the flickering would be stronger. If the wind is very, mild or very smooth, then it would be very, very, the flickering would be very little. Now that flickering happens there. But he says that Vayu Rahit Sthan, where there is no movement of the air. Vayu Rahit here does not mean that without air, because he has already said, and he will say further down, that where there is space, there is Vayu. That is what Lord Krishna will say in one of the verses further down, that wherever there is space, there is Vayu. That is inevitable. The Vayu is always there. But here, Vayu Rahit doesn't mean that no air, but there is no movement of the air. If there is no movement of the air, means the Deepak is absolutely still. Precisely that is the state of human chit, human mind. Chit is basically the mind plus consciousness. The two put together is chit. Mind and consciousness, when they are put together, because there is no mind which can act without consciousness, and when the consciousness is active with the mind, then it is chit. Now, chit keeps flickering. It's a tendency of the chit. I have observed it many times when I sit in meditation. I find that despite my best efforts, the thoughts keep coming and going. Certain thoughts come and go. Then you again bring your mind back to the, position where you want it to be. And then again, after a while, some disturbance comes and mind goes away. Now that is the flickering state of mind. So he says that a person who is completely in meditation, totally in meditation, then that state becomes stable. That flickering stage goes away. But there is a very important word which has been used here, which we must understand. The word here is that परमात्मा के ध्यान में लगे हुए. Now, this is the word we have to understand why he is saying कि आपका चित्त परमात्मा के ध्यान में क्यों लगना चाहिए. Because so long as the mind is in the world, it will keep flickering. There is no other option because various thoughts will keep coming and going, coming and going. But once you are away from the worldly objects, and that away is possible only when you are with something else, because mind has to be with something. So the mind cannot remain unoccupied, unfortunately. Either you dissolve the mind completely. So long as the mind is there, it will keep flickering if it is in the world. But if you can establish the mind in the Almighty, in the Supreme Power, then it will remain stable. So this is extremely important here. That the word here is used is yujjato. Yujjato yog matmana. That it has to be completely dissolved with the Almighty, then it will become stable and absolutely non-flickering. So this is very important. That is the state. That is the final test of a person who is established in yoga. So once the person is established in yoga, then his mind will not flicker, his mind will obey his instructions. It will go according to the instruction of the person. That okay, let us take our mind to the space and see, observe the beautiful sky. Let's take our mind to the ocean and observe the beautiful waves of the ocean. Let us take our mind to the mountains and observe the snow-covered peaks. Let us take our mind to the beautiful structure, in Agra in Taj Mahal, and let us see that structure. So when you are able to direct your mind on your own desire, then mind is under your control. But if it is flickering and the mind is taking you, which is the most 99.9% cases, the mind is flickering and taking you here and there, then that is not under our control and the person is not yog yukt. Yog yukt is only when we are able to direct the mind. That is what we practice in our meditation. We direct the mind, we take the mind where we want to take it. And that is the fundamental thing of Dhyan. So that is the verse number 19. Now, verse number 20. योग के अभ्यास से निरुद्ध चित्त जिस अवस्था में उपराम हो जाता है, योग के अभ्यास से निरुद्ध, द वर्ड निरुद्ध इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, जिस अवस्था में उपराम हो जाता है और जिस अवस्था में परमात्मा के ध्यान से शुद्ध हुई सूक्ष्म बुद्धि द्वारा परमात्मा को साक्षात करता हुआ परमात्मा में ही संतुष्ट रहता है. Now this is the ultimate state of samadhi. The previous state 19 was the state of dhyan. Here this is the state of samadhi where योग के अभ्यास से निरुद्ध. Now this word niruddh has also been used by Patanjali. He said what we call Chittravati Nirodh, that is the word he has used. The word Niruddha has come there also. And here Lord Krishna is using the same word Chittam Niruddham. That is the Sanskrit word Chittam Niruddham. That Chitt ko Niruddha karna. So primarily that is the fundamental, crux of reaching the Samadhi. So after the state of Dhyan, when you are reaching the 8th state, that is the state of Samadhi, then what are the symptoms of that? The symptoms are here. That योग के अभ्यास से निरुद्ध चित्त जो है now had become stabilized. It's not going here and there. Upram means basically the person is not attracted by the worldly objects anymore. He has absolutely stabilized himself and divorced himself from the attraction of the worldly objects. So that is upram. That is basically niruddh. That is the same word in a way. And then he says, जिस अवस्था में परमात्मा के ध्यान से शुद्ध हुई बुद्धि, because when you are completely established in the Almighty and you are not allowing the worldly objects to interfere in your pleasure and pain, then the mind becomes absolutely pure. Then your thinking process becomes pure. The word which we sometimes use to explain this purity is that when you clean the mirror properly, there's no dust on the mirror, then you are able to see your face correctly. When there's a dust in the mirror, then you don't see yourself properly in the mirror. So that cleaning of the dust is possible only when we establish our mind in the Almighty. Because once you establish mind in the Almighty, you see that Almighty is pervading all over. In the entire universe, He is pervading. In Isavasya Upanishad, they start with this, that Isavasya midam sarvam, jagatyam jagat. That ईसा का निवास पूरे जगत में है, चाहे वो जगत जड़ हो चाहे वो चेतन हो, पूरे जगत में ईसा का निवास है. तो exactly once you are established in the Almighty, then your thinking is that the whole world is pervaded by the universe. There is nothing else but the Almighty. And therefore there is no question of flickering. And that is where your buddhi, your intellect becomes absolutely sharp and established in the Almighty. And then you become absolutely content with the Almighty. That you see the whole universe pervaded by the Almighty, and you are sitting in that, absolutely quiet. Now that is the state of Samadhi. So this verse number 20 tells us that how you reach the state of Samadhi one by one. Now if you look at, let me just go back a little bit and explain these verses just with the reference. Now for example, in verse number 10, he talks about the first thing that मन और इंद्रियों के सहित वश में करके है और एकांत स्थान पे बैठना. Then he talks about how to sit. शुद्ध भूमि में कुशा और मृगछाला वस्त्र बिछे, उसके ऊपर सीधे आप बैठे अपनी स्नायु को, अपनी मेरुदंड को बिल्कुल सीधा रख के बैठे. So those were the things where he was talking about yam, niyam, asan. He was talking about those chapters which have been referred like this in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. And then he talks about how to control mind, how to control senses, how to be moderate in your conduct. All those things are basically reaching to the stage of that pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, which has been described in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. And the verse number 20 finally describes you that you are in a state of samadhi. You have reached a point where you are completely, fully established in the Almighty, and you see the whole universe pervaded by Almighty, nothing but the Almighty. And therefore, your intellect becomes pure and your mind becomes absolutely stable. So this is the verse number 20. Then verse number 21, इंद्रियों से अतीत केवल शुद्ध हुई सूक्ष्म बुद्धि द्वारा ग्रहण करने योग्य जो अनंत आनंद है, उसको इस अवस्था में अनुभव करता है. और जिस अवस्था में स्थित यह योगी परमात्मा के स्वरूप से विचलित नहीं होता. Now, Anand, you reach a state of complete bliss. Once you come to the verse number 20, if you are reaching that state, then the next stage is that you are one with the Almighty, that is Satchitanand, that you are one with the with Anand, and you reach a state of total Anand. Now, in this context, I would like to mention three things. In general, there are three varieties of Anand. That is Indriyanand, जो आनंद आपको इंद्रियों से आता है, which we discussed, when the outside object get in touch with your sense organs and then you derive certain sensations, pleasant, unpleasant, but pleasant sensation gives you, that is called Indriyanand. And most of us have experienced that Indriyanand. We know what is Indriyanand is, that it's a good taste or good sound or good words people telling you, or a very touch which is giving you a lot of comfort and things like that. Now those are Indriyanand, Indriyon se, bhogon se. Then the second state is, we can call it Bhajananand. Bhajananand is more or less associated with the spiritual thought, spiritual process. When you get into the spiritual process, you start with the prayer of the Almighty, but then you go further beyond the prayer, and then you start doing meditation, start contemplating on the existence of the Almighty, start contemplating on your relationship with the Almighty, and you are still in duality, that you are one and the Almighty is second. And because the Bhajananand is a dual state, that Almighty is separate from you. So that is the second stage, where you are striving to become spiritual. But in the initial phases of that spirituality, you are not, Am Brahmasmi has not reached. You are actually considering Almighty as a separate entity, and you are praying to Him, and you are trying to understand the world, you are trying to meditate on the existence of this world. So that is the second state that gives you greater anand than the anand of sense organs. Now, if you look at ourselves, we are quite a bit of us in the same state of bhajananand, that we are getting higher level of anand than what we used to get in our sense organs. And I suppose you would agree, and I'll ask you after the session today. Now, because that anand is higher, that is why we continue to pursue that path. So that is the second state. And the third state is Brahmanand. So here he is talking about, in verse number 21, he is talking about Brahmanand. That once you have reached that state which has been described in verse number 20, that you are completely dissolved in the Almighty, you see the whole world pervaded by the Almighty, your mind is not flickering, you are established in Him, then you attain a kind of infinite bliss, which is possible only through merging with Brahmanand. When your ego is also completely dissolved, your own existence is gone, you are one. The drop in the ocean has become the ocean itself now. It's not a drop separately. Similarly, we are not individual ourselves, we become part of the whole existence, which is actually symbolized by the Almighty. So this is the state where we reach. We reach a state of infinite bliss. So this verse number 21 goes beyond samadhi. It is the next stage after samadhi, that after samadhi you reach a state of total bliss. You are in fact, I think it's Svatasvatara Upanishad, I'm not absolutely sure, in which they have described variety of anand you receive, and then they give the description of each anand, but roughly, of course, there are many varieties there, but roughly they fall into the three categories, that is Indriyanand, Bhajananand, and Brahmanand. So the pleasure you derive through sense organs, the pleasure you derive through your spiritual pursuit, and the pleasure you derive when you reach at the culmination of your spiritual thinking and you are one with the Almighty, you consider all around you is nothing but the Almighty. So that is the state where you reach, and that is where he is saying that you reach a state of permanent bliss. So this is even beyond what Patanjali Yoga Sutra says, one step beyond that. So here, I think the word here it has been used is that is an, sukham antekikam, sukham antekikam, the sukh which is everlasting, which has no end, which is infinite. जिस सुख का कोई अंत ही नहीं होता है, that is the word which is that that is the kind of pleasure, that is the kind of bliss, that is the kind of anand you get. Actually, anand is the right word for that, because anand has no antonym. It is only one, as we discussed it earlier also. Sukh and dukh, they are actually antonym. On the one scale, one side of the scale is sukh, on the other side of the scale is dukh. Similarly, one side of a scale is day, another side of a scale is the night. Similarly, here, Anand has no such scale. It is only a scale in itself, and that scale has no negativity, and therefore it is infinite bliss. So we reach that state that is possible only when we are one with the Almighty, and our, buddhi, the intellect has become absolutely purified, because we have understood that whole world is pervaded by Almighty. In this world, there is nothing but the Almighty. And once we have reached that state, then we start getting that bliss, infinite bliss. So that is the verse number 21. Then verse number 22, परमात्मा की प्राप्ति रूप जिस लाभ को प्राप्त होकर उससे अधिक दूसरा कुछ भी लाभ नहीं मानता, और परमात्मा प्राप्ति रूप जिस अवस्था में स्थित योगी बड़े भारी दुख से भी चलायमान नहीं होता. Now once you have reached that state of total bliss, infinite bliss, Anand, the state of Anand, then there's nothing beyond that. So you reach there, at that point, you feel that this is the ultimate thing. उसके आगे कुछ नहीं है. There's nothing beyond that. So there's nothing to think about it. And moreover, you cannot think anymore, because you have become one with the Almighty. The thinker has disappeared there. There's no object anywhere. It's only subject. Only subject is left. The thinker has dissolved. The thinker has dissolved in the Almighty. And that is why you have become one. The drop has dissolved in the ocean. The drop doesn't exist anymore. There's only ocean. Similarly, here, once you dissolve there, then there's no thinker at all. and therefore you cannot think of higher, you know, benefits beyond that. That is over, that's fine. And you do not get destabilized by any kind of calamity, any kind of distress, any kind of stress which you might face in life, because you feel that I am part of this whole existence, one with the existence. I am one with the Almighty. There is nothing beyond that. There is nothing which can, destabilize me. So this is the state of a person who has reached the bliss, who has reached the state of Anand, who has reached one, who has become one with the Almighty. So these verse number 22 actually is nothing but a description, or a what you can call a symptom, or the visible you know observations you can see of a person who is fully established in the Almighty, who has reached the state of Brahmanand, who has become one with the Almighty. Now verse number 23, जो दुख रूप संसार के संयोग से रहित है तथा जिसका नाम योग है, उसको जानना चाहिए। वह योग न उकताए हुए अर्थात धैर्य और उत्साह युक्त चित्त से निश्चय पूर्वक करना कर्तव्य है। Now he is only telling, after describing the whole process of yoga, that how you reach there, what are various steps to reach there, and what are the symptoms of a person who has reached there. Then he is telling Arjuna that this is the duty of a person, that you should do this. Now here is one word which we must understand here, जो दुख रूप संसार के संयोग से रहित है. Now here he implies, the Sanskrit word is dukh sanyog viyogam. So he is also implying that in this world there is a lot of distress, lot of dukh. This is also the view which was used by Buddha. Buddha said that is sansar mein dukh hai, because he experienced, he saw the old man, he saw the death, and he saw the illness, and he saw, people crying and people hungry and starvation. So he said sansar dukh se paripurn hai. Now this is also the reference by Lord Krishna here, that this sansar is, is a center of distress. This is what he is saying here. Tam vidyat dukh sanyog viyogam. That इस संसार में जो दुख है उसके संयोग से आप अलग हो जाओगे. So he implies, it is not a direct reference that word is full of dukh, but he says that is sansar mein whatever distress you feel, you will be away from that distress. So that distress will not touch you because you have gone beyond the world. And this is what he says here. उसको समझना चाहिए that if you want to get out of distress in life, then you should go beyond this world. And beyond this world, the method he has explained how to go and how to reach the state of samadhi and how to reach the state of Brahmanand. And that, after explaining that, he's telling him that that is why people should understand what is yoga and how it is good for the human people existing here. And then people should work for it. They should strive for it. They should, use all their energy to attain that thing. So he is now persuading or telling Arjuna that why you should do yoga. Because of this reason you should do yoga. Because in the world there is always be distress. There would always be problems. And if you want to get out of those problems and you become one with the Almighty, then yoga is an essential path to follow. And that is why we should all follow the path of yoga and become one with the Almighty. So this is basically an explanation given by Lord Krishna that why you should follow the path of yoga, after explaining the path in the earlier verses. Now verse number 24. संकल्प से उत्पन्न होने वाली संपूर्ण कामनाओं को निशेष रूप से त्याग कर और मन के द्वारा इंद्रियों के समुदाय को सभी ओर से भली भांति रोक कर, देन वर्स नंबर 25, बिकॉज दे आर इन कंटिन्यूएशन, क्रम क्रम से अभ्यास करता हुआ उप्रति को प्राप्त हो और धैर्य युक्त बुद्धि के द्वारा मन को परमात्मा में स्थित करके परमात्मा के सिवा और कुछ चिंतन नहीं करे. Now he is actually re-emphasizing these things. The verses from verse number 10 to 19 is summarizing and re-emphasizing here that we have to get out of the desires, कामनाओं से दूर होना, that we should get out of the desires, we should get out of the expectations, and then we should exercise control over our mind and our senses, and then slowly in gradual manner we should keep practicing in a gradual manner to keep our sense organs and our mind away from the world. Upram, usko they have to be that word niruddh which has been used earlier, and there is another word here, sene sene rup sene sene urupme, that slowly you should get out of that. That is the word which has been used here in Sanskrit. So he is re-emphasizing the same thing in a different context now, that why you should do it. So he is summarizing these verses here, that first make a sankalp, that you become make a sort of resolve that you will do this, and then you get out of desires and expectations, and then you exercise control of your mind and your sense organs, and then slowly you keep working to stay away from the pleasures of sense organs and the pleasures which arise due to combination of the outside objects with the sense organs, and then you establish yourself in the Almighty. धैर्य युक्त बुद्धि के द्वारा मन को परमात्मा में स्थित करके, then you have to slowly establish your mind in the Almighty, and then परमात्मा के अलावा किसी का चिंतन नहीं करें. Now this is very important. कृत्वा न किंचिदपि चिंतयेत, that we should not think about anything else apart from the Almighty. Now, why it is important? Because the mind has the tendency to think. And as soon as you think about anything worldly, then it will keep, taking you here and there, and your chitta will be destabilized. But if you establish yourself in Almighty all the time, in the manner which has been explained in the previous verses, then the mind will not be destabilized. It will remain completely established, and it will not be carried away by the temptations of the worldly objects. So this is what he is saying here, that Paramatma mein, why we should establish the mind. Now Paramatma here does not mean that there is an individual sitting outside. The Paramatma is not a person who is sitting outside. Paramatma is the totality of the consciousness which exists in this entire existence. And everything in this existence has consciousness, whether it is a mountain, whether it is a river, whether it is an animal or a bird or a human being. All of them have consciousness. The consciousness has been divided into different categories. They call it mineral regime, that is the consciousness in solid things like mountains or minerals, or that is the mineral regime. Then you call it plant regime, where it is more active, and then you have animal regime where it is still more active, and then you have human regime where it is even more elevated, And then you have the pure consciousness, the almighty, the permanent, or universal consciousness, where it is only consciousness, that is the state where we reach that state when we are in deep sleep, pragya, that is completely only consciousness, nothing else. When we are in a state of deep sleep, there is nothing else exists but consciousness. And how do we know consciousness exists? Because when we get up from the deep sleep, we realize that we had a great sleep. Otherwise, we can't realize if there's no consciousness there. So, that consciousness which we attain in the state of deep sleep is the final state of consciousness, starting from the mineral regime to plant regime to animal regime to human regime to pure consciousness. So, this consciousness which exists everywhere, that consciousness in totality is Paramatma. Paramatma is now, of course, there are incarnations of Paramatma, because certain people, certain individuals, they come with a very higher level of consciousness, like Rama or Krishna or Jesus Christ. If they come with a very higher level of consciousness, much higher than us, many times more than us, then that is unusual level of consciousness. That is why we call them Paramatma. We call them incarnation of the Almighty, because their level of consciousness is much higher. Even amongst us, we see within our own human race, thousands of people we meet, we see that there some people have lower level of consciousness, some people have little more, some people have little more. None of us has equal amount of consciousness. There's no equality there. The consciousness differs from individual to individual. There are certain people who are highly elevated, their level of consciousness is much higher. So the whole process is to raise the consciousness to the higher level. And samadhi is the name of that process. What we discussed in these verses and what we talk from Patanjali Yoga Sutra is that process of elevating that consciousness to a higher level. So once we raise that consciousness to very high level, and some individuals have that consciousness, we call them incarnations. So this is what here it is, that Paramatma ke siva koi bhi chintan nahi kare. It means that we are considering the whole universe as one single entity, and that we are only thinking about that consciousness which pervades the entire universe, on which everything is dependent. So we are only thinking about Paramatma in that sense. So once we are one with that, then we have attained what we call the highest level of yoga, in the yoga युक्त or yoga root. We have become yoga root. योग के ऊपर आप आरूढ़ हो गए, बिल्कुल जैसे घोड़े के ऊपर आरूढ़ होते हैं, योग के ऊपर आप आरूढ़ हो गए, something like that. Now he is going back a little bit, because he knows, he must have seen Arjuna that he has not fully understood the whole process. So he is again going back and trying to explain him a little bit more about this process. Now this is the verse number 26. यह स्थिर न रहने वाला और चंचल मन, जिस जिस शब्दादि विषय के निमित्त से संसार में विचरता है, उस विषय को रोक कर, यानी हटाकर, इसे बार बार परमात्मा में ही निरुद्ध करें. Now this is what I have experienced, and I'm sure some of you must have experienced, that the attractions of the world are so many that they keep you dragging back. When you try to disengage yourself from the world, there are new attractions appear and they try to drag you inside. The attractions could be in a variety of forms. The manifestations could be infinite actually in the world. It is not only the money, it is not only the power, it is not only the status, it is not only the praise given by others, it is not only, mm, even the desire to have lot of charity and become a person who is known for charity. Now, all those things are behind these attractions. But these attractions appear in a variety of forms. That somebody wants you to, get linked with a particular organization, because then he will say, okay, why don't you become director general of this organization, or you become a director here, or no, we will give you this extra perquisite, you can travel around, around the world, will give you annual grant, so you can use this for something else, and then you will give you this particular concession, or will give you certain medical facilities. Now there are variety of attractions which keep appearing. They appear in different forms. They don't appear in one single form. There are attractions which keep appearing in different variations in our life, and the whole purpose is to distract you from the mm, what you call getting your sense organs attracted to them, so that sense organs remain engaged in the world. The sense organs should not get completely disenchanted with the world. This is what the purpose is. So he is saying that ये न स्थिर रहने वाला चंचल मन, he is himself saying that मन is चंचल and स्थिर नहीं रहता, ये it not easy to keep it स्थिर, it's very very difficult, it keeps moving like waves on the ocean. And शब्दादि विषय के निमित्त से, that is variety of, now let me explain this, that the sense organs and there is visay, and that is indriya and visay. इंद्रियों को विषय चाहिए, जैसे कानों को अच्छा म्यूजिक सुनने को चाहिए, जिह्वा को अच्छा स्वाद चाहिए, किसी को बहुत सुंदर शब्द सुनने को चाहिए, किसी को बहुत सुंदर टच चाहिए, तो वो जो टच है, जो टेस्ट है, जो साउंड है, दोज आर कॉल्ड विषय. Those are not senses. Senses are स्थूल. Senses are absolutely स्थूल, you can touch them. But the Visay is not स्थूल. Visay is, we can understand Visay, but we cannot touch it. Like music, you cannot touch it, but you understand what music is. Or you can see that, you can taste it, but you cannot, see the taste or touch it. It is only visible when you put it in your mouth and the taste appears there. Now, for example, somebody tells you to describe sweet. You can write books on sweet. You cannot explain it. You just give a small little piece of sugar to a person and tell him this is sweet. And he puts it on the tongue and he realizes this is sweet. So that is Visay. The Visay explains you the taste of the, which is the taste which is created out of a particular sense organ. So these Visay jo hain, they keep attracting you. That is what he's saying. And because of their attraction, आप संसार में विचरते रहते हैं. You keep roaming in this world because of that attraction. And therefore, it is important for you to remove yourself, to remove your sense organs periodically, from the world and bring them to the Almighty. Again, परमात्मा में लेके आए, संसार से हटा के परमात्मा में लेके आए. That is the exercise we do when we do meditation. That we don't allow our sense organs to go back to the world, but we allow them as we want them to move. So we try to bring them. परमात्मा में जाने का मतलब ये नहीं है कि सिर्फ किसी इमेज आपने बना ली परमात्मा की और उस पे जाएं, but basically you are bringing that mind back to your own consciousness, that it remains with your consciousness, it does not get detached from consciousness, because the mind tries to take you away from the consciousness. So you have to bring it back to the consciousness. So that is the exercise we do in our meditation. So this is what he has explained here, that this is what we people should do. And he's telling it to Arjuna that this is what should be done, so that your mind is fully re-established in the Almighty, and it becomes absolutely stable. It is not distracted, it is not attracted by the temptations of the world. So I think we will stop here today, and then if you have any questions, please let me know. And I would also like to ask you one question, that when you do your meditation, do you have these temptations coming back, and how often you get them, and how you try to discard them and bring back your mind to the point where you want to be? Thank you.